All right, GM everyone, welcome to another amazing Wow Wednesday. This week we're in conversation with Leanne from Black Ferns. Black Ferns is a women's rugby team. They represent New Zealand and they've won 6 out of 9 of the Women's Rugby World Cup tournaments, including the one that just happened in 2022. We're so honored to have them be a part of the Wow fam and to have Leanne here with us. It is a true honor. And also, big shout out to Humans of WoW, which is a community spotlight initiative to humanize the person behind the PFP. Very excited to be co hosting this session with them.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also very excited to be here.
I love that morning energy. Huge shout out to Leanne, by the way. It's super, super early in New Zealand right now, but she's still here with us to share the story of Black Ferns and just about herself as well. I think we have enough people, but without further ado, let's dive in. Let's dive into Black Fern's wow story and also Leanne. Leanne, feel free to just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Web3 and your journey with Black Ferns.
Yeah, for sure. And it is I'll do the too long didn't read version, hopefully. But I got into Web3 really quite cliche, like most of us, when, Beeple dropped his $69 million 5,000 days, that would hit the headlines. I couldn't ignore it any longer. And I'd been, blatantly ignoring it prior. I had friends that came to me in, 2015, 2017 about Bitcoin. And I honestly could not get my head wrapped around what was blockchain, how this would become something. And, like so many, I didn't get it back then. But when the Beeple headlines hit, I started to pay more attention and Bored Ape Yacht Club as well, which is, again, two very cliche kind of things happening and going on. But I came from a background of marketing and psychology, and this blew my mind, that not only could you get people from all over the world to collaborate and come together and actually be together on one thing with sort of one goal, but opening digital doors. And it just really, really captivated me. And I started my journey. I don't even know, I couldn't even tell you, my very first NFT was some banana that took me about 6 or 7 hours to buy, and many failed attempts of not transferring enough for gas and all this horrible, horrible kind of experience. But it'd be worth 2 cents now. I don't even know what it's worth now, but it cost me fortunes back then. But this was a personal journey. I was working for New Zealand Rugby in more of a business development role, more general. That was more based on whatever might be new and wonderful and wild, but probably didn't quite need a full-time, headcount on it. And so it was really always exploring technology. It ended up that way. But this was very much a personal journey at this point in time. And it wasn't until, really kind of the height of the bull run that within New Zealand Rugby, we just started to field these inbound proposals of, let's do this NFT, let's do this fungible token, let's do this, let's do that. And I was the only one internally that had any know-how, all because I'd gone down this rabbit hole all on my own accord. And I was really lucky that, I've also got a background in or a passion around, I guess, the climate side. And so when I came into Web3, I wanted to understand really, from a climate perspective, I always thought there was something really awesome here. And I know that I knew the narrative around proof of work and what was happening, but I wanted to dig under the hood and understand why they had a big carbon footprint. But that also made me explore, the wider Web3 ecosystem beyond Ethereum, beyond the other layer, into the other layer ones. What was a layer 2? What is a smart contract? All these things. I really got deep. And so when we started to field these inbound proposals, I became the sort of go-to girl to deal with these as they were coming across the desk. And it did start off with, great, just assess this one, just assess this one, just assess this one. And it quickly turned into, wow, we've got to really focus here and go, what is this? This is a big shift. And of course I was like, yes, guys, it's a big shift. We should be focusing on this. And it turned into what has now been about 18 months of what I would call a learning, exploring and assessing, what is going on here, how this is likely to impact sport, entertainment, and in fact ourselves, in how we go forward. And that's where we are today, really.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing everything that was going on in your personal journey. I feel like everyone has their whole story of like, okay, the first 100 hours that I spent in Web3, this is what it was like. And I'm sure that many people can relate to the terrible minting experience also that you had. Not me though. My first NFT was a WoW, but tell
Oh
us
God,
how
you did good.
I just got lucky, I think. But tell me your WoW story. Like, how did you find your WoW? What made you get into this community specifically? And just what resonated with you?
Yeah, and for very long, like I was not like you. Unfortunately, I was not early. As in, I watched so many. I sort of didn't take part too much. Like I bought this banana, right, and I was like, okay, that was a bad experience. I'm not doing that again. But I watched so many collections kind of grow, and I was outside of these communities. And I think sitting as an outsider was also a really interesting experience because I got to kind of take this kind of 10,000 foot view rather than being involved. And it was just before the announcement of, I think, WoWGs coming. So we didn't know about that, but there was a slight dip in the market, and I was like, I'm taking my opportunity. I'm getting in now. I'm not missing this. I'm not missing this chance. I'll never get there again. And I distinctly remembered the conversation with my husband at the time saying, there's this thing I'm going to buy. It's worth a bit of money, but I want to call it, it's a tuition. It was a tuition to me. This is like going back to university and getting something. I really, truly believe that by buying that and becoming part of the community, you learn, and this reflects again, I guess, what happened with, when we came in as the Black Ferns as well. But really and truly, the money that you spend on these things, I think, for me was really like going back to university and learning. And so, yeah, I purchased that. Must have been, gosh, what would that be? Nearly a year ago, I guess, nearly. Yeah, just, one of those things that change you. You come under the hood, you come inside, the community, and it's a whole completely different experience from being on the outside. And so, yeah, and then, I mean, the love's always been there. The love was there from when I was on the outside, but joining the community and then being able to put that together with my work, I think was one of the best days I've ever had in my entire career. I think it was what Yam was trying to do, right? And it's what made it a popular collection right from the beginning, and that it had this purpose behind it to bring women to the forefront. And it was truly doing something different. It led the Web3 world on a path that, if it wasn't there, I wonder what might have been. What we would be today without WoW and Web3 would be undoubtedly, to me, some other place I probably wouldn't want to maybe be as much of a part of, right? So I think WoW should be credited for that, or taking a huge step in that right direction of where we want to put and shape Web3. So for me, it is that. It is definitely that sort of North Star of where we want Web3 to go, and we'll always strive to get there kind of thing.
I love that. It makes my heart happy to hear this story. But talk to me about women in sports. What is it like being a woman in sports, especially on the back end as well as the front end? How has your journey been in that regard? And how did this whole Web3 thing start with Black Ferns? Like, tell us about the initial conversation about JPEGs and how that went.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few things to unpack here. And women in sport is, it's a big one. We could nearly have a whole space on digging into this, right? And I actually I come from a background of playing soccer or football, so I'm not a rugby player. And I take my hat off to the rugby players because I did turn up to training once to see if I could give it a go, and I had to tackle the bag. And the bag is, a soft 85 kg thing, but it's soft. It's not a human running at you. And I literally winded myself and was like, hey, that's not for me. I can't do that. So, yeah, I preferred playing soccer, the round ball game. But I think, there's this really interesting movement at the moment called Correct the Internet. And if you ask the internet at the moment who are, maybe the perfect cases, who scored the most World Cup tries in rugby, you'll get the answer to be male. You'll get Brian Habana is the one that comes up. Usually he scored 15 tries, when Portia Woodman, our Black Fern, has actually scored more. I think she scored 22 World Cup tries. So there's this movement around at the moment in women's sport that is like, let's correct the internet. That's telling us the wrong information. It's telling us there is a gender bias. And I think that's what we feel. We see it on the internet, but it is changing. There is real hope. And this is again why WoW resonated with me and resonated with the Black Ferns as a brand and as a team. But there is change coming. We are getting there. It is slow, but we must keep doing it. And we are seeing, some amazing watershed moments in women's sport, which have to be celebrated. Again, football, but we've, just in the last year alone, I think we sold out Camp Nou for the UEFA Women's League, the Champions Cup final. There was a sellout crowd at Wembley, which is, it's a huge amount of people turning up to watch women's sport live. And of course, here in New Zealand with the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, we sold out our Eden Park twice, I believe. So it's insane. We're starting to get there and see, movements in the right direction. So it's super exciting. And Kashmir, that was your first question, I believe. I sort of answered.
Yeah.
And then the next one was really around why WoW and the Black Ferns. And it really came down to, look, we, as New Zealand Rugby, we decided we wanted to do something, right? And you watch Web 2 enter Web 3. Some of it can be very clunky. Some of it can be out of touch. And I had watched and learned from a few masters, I think, of the game, be it Nike, Time Magazine's another good example of doing it really well. There are a few really good examples out there. And I had this philosophy that I think is very Web3. And again, I'm lucky. I was already in Web3 myself, and I think it'd be really hard to see this if you weren't, a participant and part of a community. But I had this philosophy. I think it's really important to participate before you create. Don't come into Web3 with something necessarily to take value away. Come with the ethos of what can you add, what can you bring, and that will set you at least on the right path. So we started with that mindset, like how can we participate before we do something? And of course, the clear standout was WoW. And it just so happened, all the stars aligned. We had the Black Ferns going into the World Cup coming that year. And, you think of the narrative, it's really quite easy. It wasn't even that creative, right? We're going into the World Cup with not only the nation of New Zealand behind us, but we go in there with the world of women behind us. And that is power. And that is something that, I wouldn't want to be on the other team if that's the kind of, swell behind it. And so, yeah, we sort of went with like, this is right. This feels right. And then, there are interesting things here around the kind of marketing side too. And this all kind of came together. These all parts and reasons why we did what we did. But, from a marketing perspective, usually you spend on a marketing budget and go, right, that's it. But I think this has not been done yet, but experimenting around we have seen it done around the fringes, I suppose, but you buy these things, you have the IP, there's an asset there, there's something to explore, there's something that can be, used in creative ways from here on in. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it can be. It gives it possibility. And, we're very guilty of not doing that. Maybe watch the space. We really don't know. We still very much are learning, but it's something that it's exciting. It changes the game. It really was a learning experience for us. We took, I started talking to the management team 6 months prior to getting the acquisition or acquiring the NFTs. It took 6 months internally. It took a policy change getting around the fact that we couldn't buy something that was in another currency other than just fiat currency. So, there were things that we had to unpack and uncover internally that I didn't expect at all. And it nearly didn't get there so many times. But thank you very much to the WoW team for persisting with us, being patient with us, helping us learn, helping us understand, and being so welcoming. I think, it was really, it hit all marks. We really, really valued what we got out of it, and what we learned out of it, and becoming part of the community.
I was going to say that I remember the first few calls that we had about this and everything that you had shared, the first call being like, okay, you're just this passionate WoW holder who's in New Zealand and you want to make this happen. And to the date of it like actually happening and the moon base sweep happening and coordinating all of that with you, it was good times. And I also completely get what you said about like how once the girls were in camp, like that was it. that was like winning the World Cup was their main focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's super important. But I do also want to give a shout out to Dan Carter and Aaron
Yes.
Smith, who got wows during the same time. They wore the jersey and they tweeted about it, and it was all like very, very cool. Do you have some insight for us to share about like what happened with Dan and Aaron?
Yeah, it's purely organic, right? None of this was organized. I know
Yeah.
people might think otherwise, but yeah, no, Dan Carter's amazing. He's really into the space. He has his own company here in New Zealand, or it's actually, of course, it's global, but called Glorious Marketplace that sells really like nice high fine art, digital art, and other really kind of high end, amazing projects. So he's right in, and I believe he's held as well for a very long time. I think he got it quite early, but for him to get behind the team in this sense, I think was amazing. And I've spoken to him on a number of occasions around this because there is, traditional rugby. This is a big step. We are moving into a whole new way to use the internet. And this is a big step from some traditional fans that we have. And so we have to go very carefully and go, which is again why we wanted to take the step of learning. Like, let's just learn. Let's learn out in the open and not try and pretend we know it. I don't know if anyone knows it yet. We don't know where we're exactly going. We're trying to shape that, right? So, he was very supportive around us taking this step, which was, again, like not an easy thing to get across internally, but the right one, I think. You've got to make these moves. Otherwise, you'll always fear the unknown. So, he was really, really supportive around that. And then Aaron Smith is, again, I think he's nearly a degen. He's right in the space. I know that he does a lot of other, he's into a lot of other communities as well. And again, purely organic. He just picked it up. They're all the guys and all the boys are really supportive of the Black Ferns. And yeah, to see them get behind this as well, I think was extra special.
Yeah, it was definitely extra special because everyone in the team was surprised. Like, it was a really nice surprise while we were collaborating to see these tweets pop up all of a sudden. And I think a lot of the men in our community were also hyped, especially the ones who are in like New Zealand and Australia. They were like, wow, we grew up watching these players. And to see them tweet about World of Women like that and just show support to the Black Ferns was really, really cool. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm still super happy that Black Ferns won. It was a huge win, not just for the team, but I think for the whole WoW community, because we got really behind this sportsmanship feeling,
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm just so glad we were able to share that. Do you know what I mean? As in, if we hadn't quite got there or hadn't quite won, we probably would have commiserated together too, right? But, it was great to be able to, it's like a fairy tale, to be able to write that story. You can't write it, right? But to have that story that we were part of the community and then we went on to, to get there. And we needed every single one of those people to support. That's how close it was, right? It mattered. It counted that you all showed up as a community. So it was huge. And it's only just the beginning as well.
For sure. I think it is all about doing it right. And you've been putting in the hours, the research, and also just a lot of love into trying to make this happen the right way. On a personal level, like I've asked a lot of Web3 natives, what do you think is the right way for, a Web2 brand to enter the space? And it is to collaborate with a community that is aligned with your values. And Leanne, I think that's exactly what you've done here. And it's super special because it's a community that you participated in first, discovered your love for, and then connected to your broader IRL life. So I think that that's super commendable. I remember during one of our calls, you said that you were very careful while picking out every single WoWG that the wallet acquired. Like, you guys were like selecting traits and stuff. So tell me a little bit more about that and what that process was like for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we had to take care here. In New Zealand, we have the Māori culture, and we wanted to be really careful that we weren't seen to kind of appropriate that or do anything around that. So we had to be really careful around what they call the moko, which is we have a facial tattoo, and we didn't want anything to kind of misrepresent that. So we were really careful around that for one thing. But two was really that I wanted a broad selection. This is ideally to represent the world, right? That's the whole point of the collection. So I really wanted to make sure that we collected or our collection was a really broad brush of what was out there, not just 33 of the same things going around. And so we were really careful with how we selected them to try and achieve that. I think, all of the traits and the features and the rest of it, we wanted to try and get a cover of. Meanwhile, I did have a budget. I wasn't able to go completely wild and just choose what I wanted. So I had to be careful about that too. But, there's some amazing ones in the collection. There's the rainbows are one of my favorites. I think they're amazing. And, the ones with really great hair. There's a number of really great hairstyles. I think when we were thinking of it, it was really like, let's get a nice broad selection, but let's be also really and careful and culturally minded here. We sat down and browsed through and had a chat, and then what I did is actually selected probably more like 40 something, just to make sure, because what had happened is so MoonPay had to do the purchase for us. This is how we had to get around our policy. So what I had to do was basically go shopping, select them, literally put them onto a Word doc and said, quickly sent them internally to say, is everyone okay with this, roughly this selection? These will not be the final ones, but we don't know what will be available. Of course, these things are moving all the time. And we were buying, not necessarily floor, but just above floor, right? So again, this is a busy space. Things are trading and moving. So it definitely happened that some of the ones I selected were not there when we went to purchase. And then it went off to MoonPay to do the actual purchase. So I didn't actually get to do them myself. They did all that for us. But it was myself and Charlotte from MoonPay, who's their head of concierge, and she must get to do this all the time. But I was hugely excited to browse through and just pick all these ones out. It was very cool.
Yeah, I distinctly remember speaking to you about this, and it's interesting to hear how mindful you guys were of just making sure that you're not offending anyone, making sure that everything is aligned with the culture that you have. And I know we're almost at time, so before we wrap up, I did want to ask if you had to give advice to other brands entering Web3, how would you tell them to go about it? And what do you think is the right way to do this?
Yeah, I think, I actually wrote a post on my LinkedIn after Porsche and their entry. And this is, no discredit to them, and they did what they did for their own very, very own reasons. But I think when you look at Web3, and I nearly think we'll almost stop talking about the fact that we enter Web3, because Web3 will start to merge. We'll start to get to the 2.5 stage before we know it, right? But I think, if you're moving into this space and you're coming with intent, that there's a mindset shift that you must undergo, right? And that's what I think those here that are, involved in these communities get and understand. That when you look at all the sources of capital, it is not the financial capital that matters. It's the people. It's the people behind it. It's the intellectual, all that stuff is actually more important. And then, it always has been in Web 2 as well. And, we know brands and companies that put people first, put customers first, do better. But it has never been more obvious in Web 3 and never been more important to do it that way around. And anything that falls short of that, anything that feels like a cash grab or, putting the money first, most times will be found out very quickly. And so I think that would be my advice, is that really try and undergo that mindset shift. And again, the way I believe that can be done is by participating before you start to create anything. Start by being here. Join a community. That's the thing. It's easy to do that. It's not even hard. All you have to do is buy something. Mind you, it can be hard if you've got to go through 6 months worth of policy change, of course. But that it is as simple as that. You only need to join communities. The communities will all help you. They are all willing to especially WoW from first-hand experience. But that's all you really need to do is listen and be part of. And I think it is that simple. It's not really that difficult. It just takes time. And yeah. The cool thing was when I look back at how we've gone about it, is I wouldn't change a thing. There's not one thing I go, I would have done that differently. anything that was like last minute or rushed or anything was really just part of the learning, when I look back. So I feel very fortunate that it was just dipping a toe, right? We were just getting started, but to do it in that way and have to come into a community full of support and love and really welcome us and really be stoked that we're there, we were extremely fortunate for. And when we look back, it's like, it just went so well. And so, yeah, I think it's taking time, participate before you create, and really listen, so you can go through that mindset shift and see, Cash, you told me about that, the first 100 days. It's like the moment that the light bulb goes on where you get Web3, like, oh, right, this is what's going to happen here. And you need that moment. Otherwise, you're not ready yet. And so until you go through that, don't start, basically. We'll start thinking, but don't start creating. Like if I had gone back and studied for a year at university, there's no way I would have got out what I got out of becoming part of, Web3 communities for 12 months even. The learning curve is huge and steep, and the pace is fast, which actually is, when you think about the bear market versus the bull market, it is a nicer pace in the bear market. Things are more genuine here. Things are more, I think things are done with intent here. Generally that mindset has shifted because you're not here just for money. You're here for the other reasons. And there's this really good saying that I heard is that, it feels like the tourists have left and the locals are staying for another round. And, the locals are what you're here for, right? They're the ones that make the space and will shape this space. And I think that's what's really exciting as well, is that those that are here now are literally putting down the foundations for how we want to see this technology shift play out. And that's what gives me real hope that we're on the right track to doing great things. And the future looks really exciting.
I adore that. But I think that there were some real nuggets in there for brands that want to get into the space. The whole nature of collaborating with OGs to collaborate with existing communities is super, super important. Beyond grateful for your time and this lovely conversation. Shout out to Humans of WoW who are doing community spotlights. It's an honor to be collaborating with you on this. And we will see you again next Wednesday.
Thanks so much. Love to you all.